things spiraled out of control with my parents, I had no choice. I moved out. My luck couldn't have been worse. I had no place to stay, and my friends' couches were only an option for so long. Desperation set in. I spent days scouring roommate and apartment apps. Then I found it. A room listed by someone named Luke. His 3-bedroom, single-story house was renting for $1,200 a month. He'd be both my landlord and roommate since he also lived in the house. His ad noted that he was rarely home, so the renter would have the place mostly to themselves. But there were rules. In bold capital letters he listed them: no parties, no large gatherings, no drinking in the living room, and absolutely no access to the basement. It seemed reasonable, so I decided to meet him. The moment Luke opened the door, something felt off. He was reserved, quiet, and visibly nervous. His voice trembled as he showed me the house, stuttering through the details. The bedroom was decent-sized, and the house had an open layout. For $1,200, it seemed like a steal. During the tour, Luke repeated one thing: the basement and attic were off-limits. He claimed they were used for storage and emphasized that again and again. At the time, it seemed harmless. I moved in 2 days later. There was no lease, no paperwork, just a month-to-month agreement paid in cash. The bedroom was already furnished, and he even gave me a key to lock my door. At first, I thought it was a kind gesture. But Luke, he was a mystery. He never told me what he did for work, only that he was supposed to be gone most of the time. But that wasn't true. Every day, his car was parked in the driveway. Every night, I'd hear sounds outside my bedroom, footsteps, doors opening and closing. One night, curiosity got the best of me. I stepped out of my room to go to the bathroom. That's when I noticed the basement door was open. I shouldn't have looked. From the top of the stairs, I could see a dim light coming from somewhere below. Then I heard it, a loud bang. Frozen, I stared into the darkness, heart pounding. Then Luke appeared at the bottom of the stairs. His face, it wasn't anger, it was something else, something unreadable. "Shut the door," he said, his voice sharp, his tone chilling. I stumbled back, stammering an apology, and shut the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with questions. What was he doing down there? A week later, I came home and found my bedroom door unlocked. I always locked it before leaving. Inside, my belongings had been moved. My clothes were a mess, my dresser rummaged through, and my closet door was cracked open. He had a key. My privacy had been violated. I decided to confront him. I knocked on his bedroom door, but there was no answer, even though his car was outside. Something felt wrong. That night, while I was microwaving dinner, I heard Luke's door open. He was leaving. I stopped him, asking, "Did you go into my room?" He stared at me, expressionless, and said, "No." I told him about the unlocked door, about my things being moved. He brushed it off, claiming I had the only key. Then, without another word, he walked out. I started looking for a new place. I couldn't stay here. The next day, while Luke was gone, I did the unthinkable. I opened the basement door. There was no light switch, so I used my phone's flashlight. The stairs creaked loudly under my weight. At the bottom, I found an ugly, tan carpet and a musty smell that worsened as I moved deeper into the room. In the corner was a door. It was locked, but the stench coming from behind it made my stomach churn. It wasn't just bad, it was wrong. I turned to leave but noticed something. A stack of boxes, sealed with duct tape, sat against the wall. I didn't open them. I didn't want to know. That night, I locked my door and tried to sleep, but something woke me up. The floorboards creaked beside my bed. I turned my head, and there he was, Luke, standing over me in the darkness, watching me. I screamed. "Shh," he hissed. "Did you go into the basement?" I stammered. "No. How did you get in here? I locked the door." He raised his hand, empty, and whispered, "Are you sure?" Then, without answering my questions, he said, "I think you should find somewhere else to live." I packed that night. As I shoved my belongings into bags, I knocked on his door and demanded half the rent back. Moments later, his arm extended from the doorway, holding a stack of bills. I grabbed it, not caring if it was the full amount. I left. That night, I slept in my car. The next day, I went back to my parents' house. After telling them everything, they welcomed me back with open arms. Luke, I don't know what his deal was, but whatever was in that basement, I'm glad I never found out. It was my junior year of college. I had just moved off campus into a student apartment building. My roommate David was assigned to me by the school, a random pairing of two students who needed housing. At first, David seemed like a nice guy. He was polite, friendly, always smiling, and quick with small talk. But as the days passed, I started noticing strange things about him. Little quirks. Odd behaviors. It began with how David would linger in my room. He asked pushy, personal questions, poked around my belongings, and acted far too comfortable for someone I barely knew. I brushed it off at first, thinking he was just trying to be friendly. But the more it happened, the more uneasy I felt. Then came the noises. Late at night, I'd hear strange sounds coming from David's room, faint whispering, shuffling noises. At first, I convinced myself it was just him watching TV or talking on the phone. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. One night, the noises became impossible to ignore. Unable to sleep, I decided to investigate. Creeping silently down the hall, I pressed my ear against David's door, straining to hear. What I heard chilled me. It was David, whispering to himself in a low, muffled tone. His words were unintelligible, but his voice was unsettling. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the whispering stopped. Silence, and then, Jeff. My heart dropped. He had said my name. Did he know I was outside his door? Panicking, I quickly tiptoed back to my room, crawled into bed, and lay there, heart racing. I didn't know what to make of it. Why was he whispering to himself? How did he know I was there? The unease I felt that night was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And as the days went on, the noises from David's room persisted, fueling my paranoia. I started noticing changes in his behavior. Subtle at first, strange glances, furtive movements, but they grew more pronounced. One night, I woke up to the sound of whispering, but this time it wasn't coming from David's room. It was coming from the hallway. I froze. The whispers were right outside my door. Gathering my courage, I got out of bed and pressed my ear to the door. Just like before, the whispering stopped abruptly. "Jeff," David's voice said. Trembling, I replied, "Yeah, you good?" No response. I heard his footsteps retreating down the hallway, back to his room. The following night, I woke up again, but this time to the sound of my bedroom door closing. I shot up in bed, my heart pounding. I listened closely and heard David's footsteps retreating down the hallway. This was too much. The next day, I confronted him. I told him I'd been hearing noises late at night, including him closing my door. I asked if he had a history of sleepwalking. David seemed caught off guard. After a moment of hesitation, he admitted he sometimes sleepwalked, but something about his answer felt off. I didn't believe him. I needed answers. So one day while David was out, I decided to search his room. I knew it was risky, but I couldn't ignore the growing sense that something was terribly wrong. I searched quickly, tearing through drawers, checking the closet. When I found it, a small hidden drawer at the back of his closet. I pulled it open and my blood ran cold. Inside was a collection of photographs, dozens of them. They were mostly of me, asleep. Some were taken from across the room, others from just inches away. The detail was horrifying. I could see the pores on my skin, the strands of my hair. Intermixed with the photos of me were pictures of another guy, about my age. I felt sick. David had been taking these photos without my knowledge, without my consent. I realized I had been living with someone who had been watching me, violating my privacy for who knows how long. And worse, I didn't know what he was capable of. I quickly took pictures of the drawer's contents with my phone and grabbed a handful of the photos as evidence. Then, I packed my things. The next day, I showed the photos to the student housing office. They assured me they would take appropriate action. Thankfully, I was reassigned to a different apartment with a normal roommate. I never saw or spoke to David again. Even now, years later, I can't forget those photographs. The eerie whispers, the feeling of being watched. To this day, I don't know who the other guy in the photos was. Maybe David's old roommate. Maybe he figured it out too. I can only hope he got out in time. When I was 23, I had to move out of state for work. I still work with the company, but I've been able to move back to my hometown and work at the local office here. At the time, I needed somewhere to live. Somewhere that wouldn't be bank-breaking. I made a posting on basically all the websites for a roommate. Facebook, Craigslist, Twitter, and even my neighborhood subreddit. A guy named Rob reached out to me on Facebook. He said he had a room available in his place. I looked at his pictures to see if he looked like a somewhat normal guy, and he did. I was open to the idea of having a male roommate as long as he seemed normal. Even though my parents were very against it, Rob and I FaceTimed. He gave me a virtual tour of the place. Apparently, he owned the place outright. It was a modest house in the middle of town, only a 10-minute drive from where my office would be. He also seemed pretty nice. I didn't get any bad vibes at all. His price was fair. His rules were pretty fair too. He said it was available to move in right away, which was perfect. So it was settled. A week later, I had all my things packed and drove down. I met Rob right out front of the house. He greeted me and handed me a key. The first thing I noticed about him was that he was really short. He was eye level with me. He helped me bring some of the bigger and heavier bags inside. He showed me my room, which was already furnished. He said one of his friends had been living there and recently moved out. I replaced all the pillows and bed sheets with my own, of course. The rest of that day was just me settling in. Rob, I could see, was trying to get to know me. Me, and presumably, make me feel at home. I didn't get any overly friendly vibes yet. The next day was Sunday. Rob offered to drive me around town to show me around. I wasn't eager to, but I said sure, just to get off on a good start with him. He drove us around town, showing me where the good shopping centers were, good restaurants and stuff like that. But then, he offered to get us lunch. I wasn't really hungry. He was suggesting a sit-down lunch, almost like a date. I didn't want him to get any kind of wrong idea. I just needed a room. I said, "I'm not hungry." He right away suggested we go grab drinks somewhere instead. I politely shot it down too, saying, "I don't drink on work nights." He was being a bit pushy. "Come on, just a couple drinks." I still maintained my politeness. I said, "Another time." He gave up and suddenly went really quiet, like he was upset. I'll admit, I was slightly uncomfortable, but nothing I couldn't handle. That week was my first week at work, and my attention was focused mostly on adjusting to the work week. It wasn't until a few days into the week that I got home, did my laundry, and noticed my hamper full of clothes seemed moved, like the clothes weren't how I remembered they were left. And it wasn't until I was loading the washing machine that I noticed a pair of my underwear was missing. I checked my room top to bottom, like 5 times. It was gone. I had a disturbing thought. What if Rob? No. I refused to believe that just yet, and there was no chance in hell I would confront him and ask him that. Still, I was now starting to wish there was a lock on the bedroom door. That weekend, I bought a lockable doorknob from Ace Hardware. While Rob wasn't home, I swapped out the current doorknob with the new one. Now I could leave the place in peace. I figured I'd tell Rob the next time I saw him. He didn't come home that night, though. He must have been working. His schedule seemed pretty random. That night, I awoke to banging on my bedroom door. It was Rob. He was saying my name, and he didn't sound happy. I checked the time. It was like 1:30 in the morning. I decided I would pretend I'm asleep. I was honestly kind of scared to open the door. I had a feeling it had to do with the doorknob. And I was right. The next morning, I woke up to a bunch of texts from Rob. He said, "We need to talk. Be home after work." I simply responded, "Is this about the doorknob?" He responded back, "Yes." I apologized to him and said I was planning on telling him. He replied, "It comes off today." I was getting incredibly nasty and weird vibes from his tone. My next response, I thought out a little longer and basically said how I hoped he could sympathize and understand that I'm a girl, and I just feel safer having privacy in my room. He responded a little nicer this time, but he still basically said no to my request. He said the old doorknob needed to go back on. I was confused. I was upset, but I had to respect his rules. I did install it without telling him, so I felt like he had a right to be mad. But how did he know I changed it? It's not like I had the old doorknobs sitting out in the open. I changed the doorknob back the next day and returned to Ace. This is where things went really downhill. There was a knock at the door one day when Rob wasn't home. It was a girl, around my age. She asked me if I was living here with Rob. I said yes. She warned me to get out of there immediately. That Rob had multiple restraining orders against him from different girls, and he was known to be a very dangerous, creepy stalker. I was at a loss for words. I asked her how she knew I was here. She said she knew that he was trying to rent his room, and that it's not surprising he opted to have a girl move in. She said she saw me moving in and wanted to wait till he wasn't home to come warn me. I thanked her so much. I was terrified. Now, I had already paid Rob for the entire month. I didn't know what to do. She said she would help me in any way she could. I took her number, and she left. I started packing my things and looking for other places I could move to. I found something across town, a studio apartment. A little more money, but I didn't care. I contacted the poster of the ad, and she told me I could move in as soon as possible. Perfect. Now, I just needed to tell Rob and get my money back. I started packing some of my stuff into my car and texted him that I'd have to be moving out tomorrow as something with my family came up and I needed to go home. He didn't answer. He got back to the house about an hour later and asked me about my text. I came up with my best fake story possible. He said, "Yeah, I'll give you the money back tomorrow after I go to the bank." I was super relieved. About an hour later, he knocked on my door. Then he said, "Did by some chance some girl say something to you?" I simply said, "No, what do you mean?" And he said, "Never mind. It just seems like you're running away out of here for another reason." He said, "Okay," and left. Sadly, the story didn't end there. I woke up that night and screamed at the top of my lungs when I saw a black figure sitting on the end of the bed. It was Rob. He turned and put his hand on my mouth. "Shh," he whispered. I said, "Please don't hurt me." He responded, "Why would I hurt you? I knew someone said something to you. Don't believe what these girls say." I said, "You're scaring me." And this part is still just as insane to me as it was in that moment. He started to caress my leg. "I don't mean to scare you," he said. Right after I said, "You're scaring me," I got out of the bed and ran for the door. He screamed at me to stop. I ran outside with my phone in hand and called the police. I hid in the bushes until they showed up. I explained the entire situation to them. They made Rob come outside and give his side of the story. Basically, I told them I just wanted to get all my stuff out of the room and leave. So the cops stayed there as I collected the remainder of my stuff and brought him. I see. Here's the continuation and completion of the rearranged version of the script. All of it to my car. I also insisted on Rob then giving me the money back while the police were there. And he did. Actually, the whole time the police were there, he tried his best to act like a normal dude. I could tell one of the officers then pulled me aside to tell me that this guy had been arrested before for other incidents with women. But Rob denied ever coming into my room or touching me or anything. It was all he said, she said. I left the house and went straight to a hotel for the night. The next day, I moved into the studio apartment. Luckily, the girl who posted it was able to facilitate my quick move-in. I have never and will never live with another man who's not my boyfriend or husband. Ever again. Or just anyone I don't know for that matter.